The Subcommittee on Early Childhood, Elementary, and Secondary Education will come to order. I note that a quorum is present. Without objection, the chair is authorized to call a recess at any time. Good morning. Artificial intelligence has been advancing at such a rapid pace in recent months, weeks, and days that by the end of this hearing, anything we say this morning will probably be outdated. That's perhaps a slight exaggeration, but it is the essential reality. Leading labs continue to put out new models each week, shattering benchmarks, demonstrating incredible capabilities, and pointing towards still greater advancements ahead. Indeed, there does not appear to be any limit to this progress in sight. This rapid acceleration towards the future has brought a host of anxieties, not least of which is geopolitical. At this moment, America holds a clear but precarious AI advantage. There are also concerns related to jobs, privacy, safety, control, and more broadly, a sense of uncertainty about the social changes that coming breakthroughs will herald and what our world will look like for the next generation. As understandable and important as these concerns are, the bigger picture is one of opportunity and a truly limitless sense of possibility. Even with the state of the art as it now exists, let alone what it will be next week, next year, or a decade from now, we suddenly have tools to address many long-standing challenges in new and powerful ways. Education is one very clear example of that. I'm a former high school teacher, and I believe one of the greatest failings in our country's modern history is the way millions of kids have been deprived of a decent education. Our school system has shameful achievement gaps, nowhere more so than in my home state of California. Owing to the neighborhood they were born into, far too many young people in this country are not receiving the education they deserve and are robbed of the opportunities that a quality education provides. Meanwhile, the educational attainment of the country as a whole has been on a sharp decline. AI can change that. It has the potential to give every child in America a richer educational experience than any child in America had just a few years ago. It can give every teacher in America a greater ability to reach students than any teacher did in the past. It can empower parents to follow their child's progress and guide it accordingly. For a glimpse of this potential, here's a short video.
One teacher in a classroom of more than 20 students, it may be hard for them to get around to everyone during a class period. But now with the help of this artificial intelligence tool, students are getting more one-on-one tutoring without replacing that human interaction.
What was your nonfiction?
Catalina Toledo is enjoying the extra set of instructors in her 10th grade reading class at Santa Lucia's High School.
It's a tremendous amount of help because it reiterates everything that I've taught them, and then it allows them to go back and forth with it.
It is called Conmigo, an artificial intelligence-powered tool through Khan Academy. That's a supplemental, secure educational program the district was already using.
It's the advancement of technology, guys. We're living through it.
Students like Tiffany Chofie are among the first to use this virtual tutoring program, giving her individual attention.
It doesn't give us answers at all. Actually, right now, it's asking me questions about the story, and he's like, oh, what would happen next? Instead of like throwing the answer at me, he's like, let's figure it out together.
Let me see what you got.
Toledo says diving into the world of AI can be scary and overwhelming at first. She doesn't worry about a computer taking her job, but knows it's part of the future, so better to use it in a controlled environment.
The kids are going to utilize the things that are out there, so I feel like if they're able to utilize it with us, then it's better because we can monitor it.
She says it can also give students more confidence who may not feel comfortable raising their hand in class.
It helps answer like different questions that I'm like concerned about, and like if I'm like worrying about how to spell a certain thing or how to do a certain thing, it'll answer it right away instead of having to wait for your teacher when they're busy with other students.
At the most basic level, AI tools like Conmigo from the Khan Academy give every child access to a world-class tutor in any subject. This is no small matter, Studies have shown that just a year of high-dosage tutoring can add up to a full 2 years' worth of additional learning gains. Yet, this is a very special kind of tutor, one that's available any time of the day for unlimited amounts of time, and that can't be stumped by any question. It's a tutor that is thoroughly familiar with a student's strengths and weaknesses and baseline knowledge, enabling personalized instruction that compels critical thinking without giving away answers. Perhaps best of all, this tutor is low cost or free. For most of history, access to this kind of personalized instruction would have been completely unthinkable. Yet AI has made it commonplace. These tools can customize the learning experience for each student, adapting their content, pace, and learning style to the student's performance and preferences. They can also bring learning to life in new and dynamic ways, learning physics from Albert Einstein, or engaging in a dialogue with a fictional character when studying a work of literature. We're already seeing AI widely adopted by students in limited ways. Nearly 50% of K-12 students use ChatGPT at least weekly. Of the students who use AI, 35% frequently use it to summarize information, 32% to generate ideas for assignments, and 26% to get initial feedback on their work. So the question is not whether students will use AI, that's already happening. Rather, the question is how schools can support students in using AI responsibly and in unlocking its full potential to advance student achievement. And it's not just students who stand to benefit. AI can empower teachers and school leaders to fulfill their vision for their classrooms and to connect with students in the highest impact ways. AI tools can help with tasks like lesson planning and grading, and can free teachers to focus on the aspects of education that only a caring human can provide. A recent McKinsey analysis found that AI can save teachers up to 13 hours per week. There are also, of course, risks when it comes to AI usage in the classroom. Recent studies show the ready availability of chatbots has proven an irresistible temptation to many students. Nearly 40% of middle and high school students admitted they used AI without teachers' permission to complete assignments, according to a survey last year. Now, while outright cheating is certainly a concern, the bigger challenge is to be vigilant in assuring AI never becomes a shortcut to avoid engaging in critical thinking, formulating original ideas, and persevering through challenging content. Student privacy is also a crucial issue. District leaders must be thoughtful about the data that gets collected and vigilant about securing that data. We'll hear testimony today about how district leaders and administrators can use AI responsibly without endangering students' rights. And finally, we must be mindful of excessively absorbing students into digital worlds. The negative effects of smartphone use for young people have become impossible to deny, and the last thing we want to do is compound this problem. I suspect the most successful approaches to AI in the classroom will assure human interaction remains fundamental to the educational experience. None of this, I should add, is a call for new mandates at the federal level. Quite the contrary. Education is fundamentally a state and local issue, and the best education solutions emerge when school leaders and teachers are given flexibility to do what's best for their students. This is especially true given the infinite variety of ways AI can be utilized in the classroom and the rapid pace at which it continues to evolve. The purpose of today's hearing is to cast light on the enormous potential that exists. And we can continue to highlight outstanding examples of AI in education throughout the country, so best practices can be shared. We have an excellent witness panel assembled to give us perspective on all of these questions, and I'm looking forward very much to hearing their thoughts. With that, I'll yield to the ranking member for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Kiley, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I'm encouraged that all of the witnesses submitted testimony that recognizes the opportunities and the challenges of artificial intelligence in K-12 education. We are at a pivotal time in education, and the path we choose will determine whether we can equip students and educators with the tools, the critical thinking skills, and the knowledge they need to succeed in an ever-evolving, technologically driven world. Artificial intelligence is not in the distant future, it's in our schools right now. It's shaping how students are educated and how they learn. And although this is an exciting prospect, it also presents significant challenges, particularly regarding equity and regulation. Without a doubt, dismantling the Department of Education will exacerbate inequities and set us back as a nation. The Department of Education is not just a building. Through its programs, it plays a pivotal role in closing achievement gaps and helping to meet the goal that all students including those in rural and low-income communities and including students with disabilities, have an opportunity to access high-quality public education. It is the Department of Education that helps level the playing field and provides critical resources that many districts are not able to afford without federal funding. Title I, for example, provides resources for schools with high concentration of poverty, a lifeline for the schools that need it the most. In fact, every witness here today mentioned in their testimony the importance of access, which is one of the main points of Title I. It's unclear what will happen to Title I, but without experienced implementation at the Department of Education, it's likely, assuming it survives, we will see support severely cut or limited, and the prospect of waivers to block grant Title I, which some Republicans are advocating for, is troubling because without accountability systems, we won't know if the dollars will go to the highest need schools, resulting in deepening inequities and academic gaps. It's also important to mention that the Trump administration cut funding for a significant portion of federal grants that support education, educator professional development, including the Teacher Quality Partnership. Thankfully, federal courts have ordered the administration to restore these funds. Professional development opportunities are crucial to equip educators with evidence-based teaching practices, as well as prepare educators on AI technologies and other necessary skills needed to educate students for the 21st century. It's no question that a loss of funding or inconsistent funding or delayed funding disbursement will disproportionately harm struggling low-income and rural schools and students. Without a robust and equitable funding system with a strong accountability framework, the digital divide will widen, technology disparities will mirror existing inequalities, and that will leave vulnerable students with fewer opportunities to benefit from AI-integrated learning environments or to learn proper guardrails surrounding the use of AI. During the 1990s and early 2000s, as technology was rapidly evolving, it was the Department of Education that led efforts to close the digital divide. Without federal leadership, we would have seen even greater inequities. Unfortunately, today, the Department of Education is still reeling from a significant reduction in force, including the elimination of the Office of Educational Technology. This office was instrumental in guiding schools on the safe and ethical integration of new technologies like AI, providing resources on data security and best practices. With the OET gone, we risk leaving schools and students unprepared for AI's opportunities and challenges. And related to the topic today, the massive chainsaw cuts to IES, the Institute of Education Sciences, is absurd. Research helps educators and policymakers make good decisions, and that's not something local school districts and states can easily replicate. Several states, including Virginia, California, and my home state of Oregon, have started developing guidance and policies about AI use in the classroom. But without the Department of Education's leadership, states are left to navigate this complex landscape on their own, which again creates inconsistencies and exacerbates achievement gaps. And we recognize that local schools and districts have the authority already to determine local decisions, whether it be teacher standards, class size, curriculum, that is local. But it is this federal investment in research and leadership that makes a difference. So as we grapple with the role of AI in education, we must equip students with the skills necessary to survive in today's society and economy. The jobs of tomorrow will demand proficiency in technology, including in AI. And without proper education, students, especially those from underfunded districts, will find themselves at a disadvantage, unable to compete in an increasingly globalized economy. But this issue isn't just about access to technology. It's how we use the technology. As AI is integrated into classrooms, we must be diligent so it does not reinforce existing biases or create new ones. With the department's staffing cuts and an overwhelming caseload, the Office for Civil Rights in the Department of Education, which addresses discrimination in schools through investigation, they're struggling to keep up. We need federal leadership and research to help guide the use of AI in schools so all students, regardless of their zip code, income, race, have the opportunity to learn, grow, and thrive in this new digital age. That's clear from the testimony of the witnesses today, and it's also clear that eliminating the Department of Education, and for that matter, the National Science Foundation and other research-based entities, is antithetical to that goal. So as we move forward, Democrats are committed to providing equal access to public education for all students. We're looking for reasonable policymakers from either side of the aisle to join us in strengthening local schools by preserving these important federal investments in education and education research. This should not be a partisan issue. It affects every student, teacher, and family in the country, and it most certainly affects our potential for growth and competitiveness in a global economy. I look forward to the conversation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Pursuant to Committee Rule 8C, all members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word format by 5 p.m. 15 days after this hearing. And without objection, the hearing record will remain open for 14 days to allow such statements and other extraneous material noted during the hearing to be submitted for the official hearing record. I note for the subcommittee that some of my colleagues who are not permanent members of this subcommittee may be waiving on for the purpose of today's hearing. I'll now introduce our 4 distinguished witnesses. Our first witness is Dr. Sid Dobrin, the chair of the Department of English at the University of Florida in Gainesville, Florida. Our second witness is Dr. Julia Rafelberg, the CEO of the ILO Group here in Washington, D.C. Our third witness is Ms. Erin Moat, the CEO for Innovate EDU in Brooklyn, New York. And our fourth witness is Mr. Chris Chisholm, the superintendent of the Pearl Public School District in Pearl, Mississippi. We thank the witnesses for being here today, and we look forward to your testimony. Pursuant to committee rules, I would ask that you each limit your oral presentation to a 3-minute summary of your written statement. The clock will count down from 3 minutes as committee members have many questions for you, and we would like to spend as much time as possible on those questions. However, pursuant to Committee Rule 8D and committee practice, we will not cut off your testimony until you reach the 5-minute mark. I'd like to remind the witnesses to be aware of their responsibility to provide accurate information to the subcommittee, and I will first recognize Dr. Dobrin for your testimony.
Microphone. We were not given technical instructions. So. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Committee Member, and distinguished members of the committee and others in attendance, I want to thank you first for the opportunity to speak with you today about artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence in education, specifically within K-12 education. As noted, my name is Sid Dobrin. I am chair of the Department of English at the University of Florida, where I have been faculty for 28 years now. My primary focus of research falls to writing studies, specifically in terms of emerging technologies such as augmented reality, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence. I won't bore you with my other bona fides since you have them in front of you, other than to say over the last 2 years I've had the opportunity to speak to more than 70 campuses worldwide about integrating artificial intelligence into curriculum. And I have to tell you, I very much appreciate getting those invitations and the invitation to speak with you today, because it usually goes something like this. Hey, Sid, could you come talk to us about artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence and education in these massive galactic subjects? And could you do us a favor and wrap it up in 3 minutes? These are big, complex subjects. No matter what I say today, we'll only be scratching the surface of the conversations we need to be having. Since the subject of and research about artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence in the workplace is such a complex and extensive conversation, what I'm going to talk about now really is just sort of introductory. The introduction of generative AI tools like ChatGPT have marked a turning point in education. While many became aware of these technologies in November of 2022, the groundwork for AI education was laid much earlier. Initiatives such as the Artificial Intelligence for K-12 initiative, developed by organizations like the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence and the Computer Science Teacher Association, aimed to create national guidelines and resources for AI education. However, the rapid evolution of AI necessitates a broader approach beyond computer science alone. Today, integrating AI into K-12 education is crucial for several reasons. First, technological advancements have made powerful AI tools widely accessible, and as was noted in the opening statements, access is a key conversation that we must be having. It's also changed how students learn to interact with information. It is not enough for students to merely consume these technologies. They must also understand how they work. This comprehension will prepare them for the modern workplace where AI is becoming increasingly integral. Incorporating AI literacy into curriculum fosters critical thinking and problem-solving skills essential for success in any career path. Employers are increasingly looking for candidates who can navigate complex AI tools, analyze data, and make informed decisions. By embedding AI education across subjects, we can equip students with these vital competencies, building a more adaptable, innovative workforce ready to meet the demands of a rapidly changing job market. Moreover, as we transition into an AI-driven economy, workforce readiness will hinge on our educational system's ability to prepare students for these new realities. We must ensure that our students are not just passive users of technology, but proactive participants who can leverage AI to enhance their creativity and productivity. Thus, in my comments today and in my written statement, I urge the committee to prioritize AI integration into K-12 education to prepare our students for the future. By doing so, we not only enhance individual career prospects, but also contribute to American innovation and economic competitiveness on a global scale, which I address in my written testimony. I want to thank you for your time and for the opportunity to speak with you about this pressing issue. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'll now recognize Dr. Rafelbehr for your testimony.
Thank you. Chair Kiley, Ranking Member Bonamici, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today regarding the integration of artificial intelligence in K-12 education. My name is Dr. Julia Rafelbehr. I'm the CEO of ILO Group. We are a woman-owned, woman-led policy and strategy firm. We work with over 200 districts and states nationwide. Our work impacts 1 in 3 students in the country. I'm also the founder of Women Leading Ed. We are the largest national nonprofit network for women in educational leadership. We have members in every state in this nation. Today, I advise education leaders nationwide. I serve on multiple federal and national boards, including the National Assessment Governing Board. AI is rapidly becoming one of the most impactful innovations across all industries. It has the power to transform how educators teach, how students learn, how schools operate, and how prepared our future workforce will be to leverage emerging technologies. However, Women Leading Ed did a survey of hundreds of women across the country, and what we learned is that 81% of leaders feel that AI is significantly impacting their systems. However, fewer than 10% report that they have the adequate resources for effective and safe implementation. Given this reality, we must ensure that every student, educator, caregiver, and community member is equipped not merely with digital literacy, but with AI literacy. The 2024 Bipartisan House Task Force on AI rightly recognizes the importance of AI literacy and the need for resources for it. Our work has also found that to establish robust foundations for responsible AI usage, there must be meaningful and ongoing community engagement. Based on ILO Group's specific work on AI for the past 2.5 years, I offer you 3 specific recommendations for federal policy. First, the federal role should be intentionally limited. It should allow states and districts the flexibility and the autonomy to lead AI integration efforts that reflect their unique contexts. Given the rapidly evolving role and the nature of these technologies, decisions about AI literacy specifically should remain local rather than federally defined. Second, strengthening data security and privacy protections must be an immediate priority as AI adoption accelerates. Here, the federal government has an appropriate role to provide consistent cybersecurity and data guidance across all states and across all agencies. Education systems increasingly face sophisticated AI-enhanced cybersecurity threats, making standardized protections essential. Federal policymakers could develop a comprehensive data privacy bill that supports effective policies and best practices related to online safety and data privacy that are broadly disseminated to states. Third, the federal government has a critical role in funding research that rigorously assesses AI's impact on education. The federal government is uniquely positioned to research and evaluate where rapidly evolving AI tools enhance educational quality, relevance, and efficiency, and also to evaluate its risks and conduct cost-benefit analyses at scale. Federal support is essential for analyzing and sharing evidence-based practices and ensuring that educator and student privacy is adhered to. We recommend convening a White House Summit on AI in education to examine both the opportunities and these limitations. In conclusion, thoroughly integrated AI can transform educational outcomes, but achieving this is going to require careful planning, prioritizing deep stakeholder engagement, comprehensive AI literacy, and robust security measures. Thank you again for your leadership on this critical issue and for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thanks very much. I'll now recognize Ms. Moat for your testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Kiley, Ranking Member Bonamici, and members of the committee. Thank you for the time and attention today. I appreciate the chance to address you about the state of AI in K-12 education. My remarks are shaped by decades of work at the intersection of education and technology. As a technologist and enterprise architect, I've been using AI and engineering technology for schools, including the charter school that I founded in downtown Brooklyn, for more than a decade. My comments today are informed by my experience working alongside state chiefs, district administrators, educators, families, communities through the EdSafe AI Alliance and Innovate EDU. The Alliance fosters collaboration and knowledge to prioritize student well-being and effective learning outcomes through the SAFE framework: safety, accountability, fairness and transparency, and efficacious use of AI in education. Though my most important role is that of a mother of 2 school-age children. And like some of you and all parents across this country, I want to ensure that my children are safe, that they're known and cared for, that their data is safe, their teachers are supported, and they have a pathway to join a future workforce where a prerequisite for any career, from lawyer to doctor to plumber, will be about how you work alongside and manage artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is an arrival technology. Arrival technologies like electricity, social media, or the internet are massively disruptive and rapidly reshape how we teach, how we learn, how we live. Right now, AI's use is uneven and limited across school communities, with only about 25% of educators reporting that they have used AI in the classroom or even in their preparation. Access to this technology and the resources to support building AI literacy are unevenly distributed. How we support AI in education and its adoption must be about embracing opportunity, access, fairness, especially for our under-resourced rural, urban, and suburban schools and communities. The story of AI in education is one of both promise and peril. AI offers the promise of personalized learning and improved student outcomes. AI's growing capacity to tailor content to each student's pace, including those with disabilities, represents a significant advancement in education technology. However, to unlock personalized learning, AI needs a vast amount of data. This need can raise significant risks regarding how the data is stored, who has access to it, and the potential for its misuse. AI promises to enhance the efficiency of educators and administrators by supporting them with through a range of time-consuming administrative tasks. However, tools must be reliable, safe, and effective. We must work to mitigate the existing biases that exist in these tools, increase algorithmic reliability, and trust in the outputs. A critical aspect to balancing this promise and peril, as my fellow witnesses have said, is AI literacy and investing in professional development for educators and support for students to ethically use this technology. America's education is at a critical juncture, hindered by significant gaps in our own public infrastructure that present barriers to innovation that put our economic prosperity and, frankly, our national security at risk. Relying solely on state-level action for AI literacy and AI deployment is a recipe for fragmentation and missed opportunity. In education, we've seen this before, with a patchwork of student privacy and data laws that create market failures for industry, stifle startups, and limit our ability to harness technology to support educators, students, and families. AI's nature transcends state lines, making a federal framework critical for interstate commerce and essential for maintaining national competitiveness. Industry alone cannot carry this burden. Across-the-board cuts to the U.S. Department of Education, National Science Foundation, Department of Commerce, and other federal agencies pose a significant threat to our nation's ability to meet these demands, including vital education technology support directly to states and districts. Imagine an education system empowered by artificial intelligence, a force as transformative as electricity, the automobile, the internet. With decisive national action, America can create robust infrastructure for AI in education, unlocking personalized learning, enhancing teacher effectiveness, and securing our global leadership by supporting schools and districts. The stakes could not be higher. Either the United States boldly leads, securing prosperity, human flourishing, and technological sovereignty for future generations, or we lose a race as important to this nation as the race for space was. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And lastly, I'll recognize Mr. Chisholm for your testimony.
Chairman Kiley, Ranking Member Bonamici, and the rest of the members that are here today, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. It's been a really interesting 18 hours getting here. I didn't think I was going to make it with the flight cancellations, but I am here, and I'm honored to be here to answer a few questions for you guys. I want to take this in a little different direction. You have my written testimony, and my written testimony goes all over the place. There's 10 or 12 topics there. So I really want to cover a couple today that I think are the most important. First and foremost is workforce development. That is something that we need to be focusing on in the K-12 world. I can tell you this, I did a presentation a couple of weeks ago for business and industry. It was open to anybody that could come or wanted to come. And we had people from IT, we had people from insurance, we had people from banking, we had people from all walks of life coming into this. And really, the point of all of this is AI is going to be involved in every branch of business moving forward. It doesn't matter where we go or what we do, and that's global. That's not just Mississippi, that's not just the US, that's globally as well. We're going to see AI in everything that we do. It is going to be the new industrial revolution. And a lot of times in education, we're the last ones to change. You know, it takes us a long time to get things moving. So I've really tried to be on the front end of this in doing a lot of training in our state and teaching people how to use this and the right ways to use it. The second thing is I really want to touch on efficiency. This is a big part of what I do in giving these presentations to other school districts, to other states as well. Efficiency is where this train is driven from. AI can make all of us so much more efficient, and that is teachers, that's students, that's administrators, that's central office personnel. Everything that we do, creating our own agents that can do things for us is how we create that efficiency. And again, it's not as hard as people think it is to create these things. So in the end, ultimately, that's what we're trying to do is create efficiency within schools. And again, I agree with a lot of things that have been said here already. I'm not going to rehash a lot of those. A lot of those are in my written testimony as well. But in the end, what we need to do is continue to move forward. This is not going anywhere. And so we in the K-12 world, we need to respond to this as quickly as possible. I want to end with a story quickly. And I have an English teacher who has 29 years. She can retire anytime that she wants. In fact, she called me this fall and said, I'm going to retire. And I said, I need you to come and talk to me for a few minutes. I don't need you to retire. So she came over and had a discussion with me, and she said, I just can't do it anymore. She said, I'm grading papers every night for 3 and 4 hours a night. It's taking me 8 to 10 days to get this information back to kids. I just can't do it. I need to be a mom. I need to be a wife. I just can't do it anymore. And I said, well, can you spend about an hour with me? And she did. So we created an agent for her. We uploaded the state writing rubric, and basically we took everything that she teaches in writing, from introductory paragraphs to conclusions, transitions, sentence structure, all of these things, and we created an agent for her to use in the classroom. So now she doesn't have to take those papers home and grade them. And understand the AI is not doing the grading. The AI is a tool that she is using to help grade. So I think, again, that just gives you an example of where we can be so much more efficient in the classrooms as administrators, as teachers across the board. And again, I will certainly take any questions. And again, I am so very proud and honored to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Under Committee Rule 9, we will now question witnesses under the 5-minute rule. And I'll now recognize Mr. Ruley for 5 minutes, the representative from Ohio.
Thank you so much, Chairman. I appreciate that. Mr. Chisholm, I think everyone's a little nervous about AI, just in general, but also optimistic for what the future could possibly hold. Could you share some of your stories with you about students and this tool and the ability to excel them as a student in America?
Absolutely, I'm happy to do that. It really begins with the teacher, you know, and again, I don't want you to think that I'm saying that we need to teach elementary and middle school students how to use AI. That's not what we're doing. We're really focused on kids that are in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And again, the idea is to teach them to use this, but also to teach them to use this in an ethical way. And in our trainings and the things that we do with teachers in training students, what we talk about are really two things. And that is if you can use this as the perfect assistant and the perfect search engine, you know, you're using it in an ethical way. There's a big difference between having an AI program write for you and an AI program write with you. Those are two completely different things. And what we've seen, especially in the writing, I just gave you that example from that teacher, right? You know, she can now do these things. What I wasn't paying attention to at the time, I was helping her. But what we're now doing, instead of writing a paper every 10 days, we're writing a paper almost every day. So again, and then this opens up other things, you know, in some of our tech classes as well. It gives them new ideas and new ways to take this. And I think that is the power of AI, is the idea that it can give you ideas that you haven't thought of because it's got access to the full internet. So again, there are 1,000 stories that I could share, but that just gives you an overview of the direction that we're going and the way that we're using it. But I will tell you, it starts with the teacher. It starts with administrators and teachers. If they're not on board first, our kids are not going to use it in the right way.
I really appreciate that. And, you know, being a parent and also looking back in my own mind's eye, when you look at a subject like AI, it's a little contradictory in my own mind about the love and the hate and the scariness of it. I think, you know, the idea that could cure cancer with AI and you could have these kids learn in ways they never possibly could. But do you have a little quick piece of advice for mom and dad that maybe are a little bit worried about the guardrails? You know, some of us were raised, you know, watching The Terminator. And I mean, that's obviously, hopefully not going to ever happen. But do you have anything to calm down mom and dad?
You know, I get that a lot in every presentation I give, is there is a healthy fear, and I think we should have a healthy fear of it. You know, I think for parents, it is the communication piece with their own kid, and it is making sure that they are also teaching good habits to kids with this. You know, I think one of the scary things is and there are models out there that are completely open that have no guardrails, and I think that's one thing that scares me a little bit. You know, you can actually go to olama.com and you can download any model that you want. Some have the guardrails taken off. If a kid is in the tech world and knows how to do this, that can be a scary proposition for a child. So I think, again, monitoring what your kids do and having good conversations on what good behavior on this looks like is no different than social media or using the internet in general.
I appreciate that also. And finally, probably my most passionate question I have for you. I was on the school board for 8 years, and I worked with students very closely. I was very hands-on approach, especially when I was the president of the school board. But I wanted to take focus on AI, and I want to concentrate on a IEP or a 504 plans are probably my top priority that I've always been in school, and I know a lot of moms out there and dads are worried about this. Can you talk about AI and the potential to help our students with disabilities and how exciting that could be for their future in learning?
Oh my goodness, that's fabulous. My wife is actually the special education director in the district. So I've created several things for our teachers to use. And I think the best part of this is you can take a student's data. And again, this is something we may bring out at some point. We have our own AI server in the district, so we don't have to worry about FERPA laws. Okay, so we could take the students' assessment scores and we can match those to state assessments. And then we can use the power of these AIs to actually script an individual plan for that kid with a path to proficiency. So I think that's the exciting part about this. And literally that is done in 20 or 30 seconds. We upload a couple of PDFs, we tell it what we want it to do. I've already pre-trained this in the background to do what I want it to do. And in the end, it gives that kid a short-term, medium-term, and long-term plans that are developed around that individual child as opposed to just the entire classroom. So again, that's one of the things that excites me the most about this.
And that could probably be even flipped onto like higher ed if you go to the university or whatever, because it's so individualized for that particular student. It could be a growing tool that child grows into adulthood with that, correct?
Yes, sir, 100%. I don't think this stops at K-12. Honestly, I don't think this stops at college. I think we're going to see this moving into the business world. Knowledge is going to be something for everybody now, and I think that's what's changing in the world of AI. You know, we pay doctors lots of money, right? But now everybody's going to have access to this specialized training that they've had for years. So again, I don't think it stops in K-12 and college. I think that rolls right into adulthood as well.
How exciting. Thank you. I yield my time back, Chair.
Thank you very much. The ranking member, Ms. Bonamici of Oregon, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Moat, we spoke about the Trump administration's plans to dismantle and abolish the Department of Education and what that would mean to not only the K-12 system, but institutes of higher education, informed policymaking, civil rights, et cetera. So could you summarize what, in your opinion, from your work as a technologist, what would dismantling the Department of Education mean for students and our locally driven public education system, especially regarding the use of AI in K-12 schools? And then I want to have time for another question, too, about professional development.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think we have to recognize that, as you shared in your opening statements, conversations about curriculum, conversations about what's happening in the classroom are inherently a local context. But the Department of Education provides critical support to districts across this country and resources, particularly around education technology. There are over 13,000 public school districts in this country. Not all of them can have a Mr. Chisholm who builds his own AI server. They need cybersecurity expertise. They need interoperability and privacy expertise. They need the ability to pick up the phone and call someone at the Office of Civil Rights and ask questions about whether or not the use of this tool is within the bounds of the law. We can't expect that expertise and capacity to be built in every school district in this country. And so if we remove those supports, if we remove the critical research and development function about what works for whom and under what conditions at the U.S. Department of Education, I worry that local schools and districts won't actually be empowered to make the decisions that they should be making about what's taught, what tools, and how we support educators and students throughout this country.
Thank you, and I'm sure everyone here recognizes the importance of professional development, and educators have various levels of skills when it comes to technology. So I want to ask you, you noted in your testimony at one point that there was a risk of over-reliance on AI that may in fact diminish critical thinking and creative problem solving. I also want to just acknowledge Dr. Durbin said something about the importance of the most sought after skills: communication, critical thinking, problem solving, teamwork. So how would professional development, how does that make a difference, and how would it present new opportunities for educators? How can it inform educators about the risks of AI, and how does the elimination of the Office of Educational Technology and cuts to these professional development programs affect opportunities for teachers who are using or want to use more AI?
So I'm going to introduce a critical concept, I hope, to this committee called humans in the loop in terms of technology. This is the idea that when an IEP is generated by AI, there's still a special education teacher or a special education coordinator who's looking at that IEP and saying, does this match the student that I see in front of me? AI is never going to replace the fundamental human enterprise that is education. So how do we equip every teacher with the necessary literacy skills to work alongside this technology, to be stewards of minor data, to protect data privacy and security, to choose the right tools, and to stay engaged in this technology? We can only do that if we support AI literacy and professional development for educators throughout this country. Let's be honest, when I was running my school, I had a lot on my plate. Frankly, teachers have more on their plate today than they did when I was running my school in Brooklyn. There are challenges with youth mental health. There's ways to meet the workforce demands. There's questions from parents. There's increased need to close academic achievement gaps. We need to be able to support educators and not just add another thing to their plate. They need the learning, they need the skills, and they need the understanding of this technology if we expect them to adopt it for the efficiencies that we're talking about here today, the personalization, but also the ability to move forward.
Thank you, and you mentioned data security and privacy, key issues. I also serve on the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, and was a member of the bipartisan AI task force. And I hope everybody in this building is listening to all of the testimony here today, where everyone is emphasizing the importance of data security and privacy, and I hope that we can get that done on a bipartisan basis. I just, in my remaining few seconds, I want to ask Dr. Raphael Baer, you talked about the importance of federal research. Where have you seen the most beneficial research being done when it comes to artificial intelligence and education?
I think the role of federal research is absolutely critical. Federal research helps to signal what is important. It provides at scale an ability to look at whether things are truly relevant, under what conditions they're working, and whether or not we're getting the kind of return on investment that we would expect from that level of research.
And where are you seeing that research? The beneficial research, what agencies have been doing that?
What agencies at the federal level
Yes.
are doing that? I think you have a number of different agencies on the federal level who've been doing strong research. I think for states, it's about the signaling that the federal government does in putting out that research and being able to stand behind that research.
Thank you. And as I yield back, Mr. Chairman, when it comes to artificial intelligence, I always have 5 hours of questions, and I only give 5 minutes. So.
Thank you. The representative from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman, Ranking Member, thank you so much for this hearing. First of all, Ms. Mood, I want to say I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, AI is incredible opportunities, but it doesn't replace our teachers. It makes them more effective. And AI without either HI or RI, human intelligence or real intelligence, it's just not going to get it done. It may mislead us. So, as we've heard today, artificial intelligence presents a unique opportunity to rapidly advance the educational landscape for students with disabilities. In just the last 2 decades, we've seen enormous growth and success of assistive technology in aiding these students. And I believe AI presents the next frontier in helping to ensure all students have access to a high-quality, appropriate education that best fits their abilities. Maybe that's why we haven't gotten around to doing our job of reauthorizing Individuals with Disability Education Act, because with this new frontier, we could be taken into consideration as we actually do the reauthorization of IDEA. It's long overdue. Dr. Rafelbear, I know AI is making possible the development of new screening tools and assistive technology such as screen readers. Given your previous experience as a special education teacher, and thank you for doing that, could you talk more about the benefits AI adoption might have for students with special needs?
Yes, thank you for that question. I'm really excited as a former special education teacher about some of the power and the potential, particularly when it comes to things like screeners. I think there are so many opportunities to learn more about our students and to be able to use that information in connected ways to give us a fuller picture about each individual student, helping to unlock new ways to think about supporting them. But I also think that, like all things, this is all very new. And I think being able to really understand and look at the impact of this and see whether or not these screeners and these tools are working the way that we would expect and for what types of students and under what conditions is such an important research function that we need to continue to explore. I think that there has been some really promising early research recently out of Ector County in Texas, where they were looking at the way in which AI could support not the students, but the actual tutors, the individuals who are going in and providing support to those students, and looking at tutors at different skill level. So those who were lower on their skill level, those who were medium in their skill level, and those that were said to be higher performing. And what they found was that AI supported all of them, but particularly those that were lower and middle performing. As a special education teacher, that's really exciting. That means that once we have that information from these screeners and we can better pinpoint areas that we need to support our students, that there are promising and encouraging results from the research around how AI might help all of the adults who are working with our students, but particularly those that need more support themselves to better differentiate and scaffold for those students. And that's something that really excites me.
Do you believe that both teachers and schools at this point have the resources they need to ensure students with disabilities can take advantage of these potential benefits?
I think the resource question is always a really tricky one. There's a role at every level in terms of resources. There's a federal role, there's states prioritizing resources, and then I think the private sector has a really critical function to play in this world of AI. And I think being able to bring everyone together and doing so in ways where they're partnering effectively and sharing research and information is a vital function, and it's a vital function of our states. It is imperative that our states are leading on this and that our states are collecting data and information and reporting transparently and publicly so that individuals understand what this looks like and how these resources are being used and to what impact.
Well, with benefit usually comes some type of risk, and so, for example, imagine the risk of AI-generated images, the spread of bullying tactics, or even AI that has not been properly programmed to work with specific learning disabilities could impact special needs students more than others. and I look forward to talking with you offline because I'm going to run out of time here, but basically looking to see what risks do you see AI adoption posing, particularly for those students who you would advise school leaders to balance those risks with the AI benefits. I think that's a conversation that we need to have as we pursue this. So
I look forward to speaking with you further about this. I think it is one of the most important and critical topics that you all could undertake.
thank you so much. And Chairman, I yield back.
The representative from New York, Mr. Mannion, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Kiley and Ranking Member Bonamici for holding this hearing today. Thank you to the witnesses for your detailed testimony and recommendations. AI holds potential in the classroom and outside of the classroom, and it can improve, I believe, K-12 education and be an important tool for teachers that utilize it, particularly as it relates to students entering the workforce. I, of course, share the same concerns of many members of this committee that we must be thoughtful in our approach and that the opportunities that come with AI also come with a variety of risks. As we further integrate AI into the classroom, we have to ensure that it supports and not supplants the essential roles of teachers and the broader purpose of education. As a former teacher, I believe that it's much more than academics. It's about developing well-rounded individuals that can think critically, constructively engage with their peers and communities, and successfully navigate an ever-complex world. My question is for Ms. Moat. Your testimony mentions a common concern about AI that, if not used properly, may negatively impact students' social, emotional development. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Absolutely. So I think all the witnesses have talked about the skills that employers are going to demand in an AI-empowered world. Critical thinking, working in multifunctional teams, thinking about how to do creative problem solving. That happens when you work alongside and with humans. So I'm just going to ask you about the future that we might want. So recently, a Stanford study found that a tool called Replica AI, which allows young people to create a digital twin to engage in conversations with, reduced suicidal ideation by 3%. That's great, 3%. If we get any change in young people's mental health and suicidal ideations, that's great. But last year, the CDC released a study which said one meaningful connection with a human in a school, a bus driver, a teacher, a coach, reduces suicidal ideation in young people by 33%. Do we want 3% or 33%? I would prefer for my young children to have those meaningful connections with adults who are helping them navigate this technology, work alongside it, and thinking about how to have those skills that employers will demand.
Thank you for that. My follow-up question was actually going to be about the identification of suicidal warning signs. So I think I'm going to leave your testimony right there and yield back to the chair.
The representative from Indiana, Mr. Messmer is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Ray Fulbert, in your written testimony, you said that states are ideally positioned to support districts in making locally grounded decisions that align with their unique goals. You touched on this during your testimony, but what role do you think states can play uniquely in AI adoption where individual districts might struggle?
Thank you for that question. States are, first and foremost, the ones who set the vision for where things are going within their state, and they do so through deep community engagement and understanding where their constituents are, and that is only more true in this moment around AI. I think states also play a critical data collection role. We saw this with internet access and the differences in the kind of quality of access and the unevenness between what students had access to even within a school setting versus what they might have at home or in after school. And we need to look at that in the same way with AI. We know that students are going to have very different experiences, and we're already seeing that in early survey work, where we're seeing higher socioeconomic status students who have more access to paid versions of AI. Those are important things that states should be looking into and should be collecting data about. The second area that we suggest in ILO Group's framework for state education agencies is the concept of an AI assurance lab. We think states are uniquely positioned to set up a lab that creates public transparency around what tools are being vetted by scientists and researchers from within the state, thinking about bringing task forces with other representatives on it, including having parents and caregivers a part of those labs, and not just doing the approvals on the front end, but also rigorously and often doing more research on the outputs of tools that are approved can help to give people more confidence and just understanding about all of this, and we think is an important role that states can play.
Thank you. Dr. Dobrin, you mentioned that about 25 states have or are developing official guidelines and policies for K-12 AI education. On the whole, do you think these states are rising to the challenge and giving the districts the information they need, or do these guidelines lack specificity and clarity?
Thank you for that question. In regarding what different states' legislation, like I had mentioned in the written, there are about 45 states now that are considering AI. Most of those are not directed specifically at education. However, the trickle down will inevitably be that will affect education. The thing that I think that comes out clear, and I can point to yesterday's Florida Senate discussion in the Commerce Committee about AI, is that the majority of these states are focusing on further research, which is, as my panelists have, other witnesses have noted, that's the important part at this point. We need more data before we make these decisions. So those states that are beginning to really look at what AI deployment looks like, both in workplace and in education, they're the ones who are going to, they're the ones who are going to lead that conversation.
Have there been pretty robust collaborative efforts between states that you've seen?
I honestly don't know how states are talking to other states.
Okay, thank you. You'll back the rest of my time.
The representative from Connecticut, Representative Hayes, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today to testify. Advanced instructional technologies can be transformative, enhancing both teaching and learning. However, any implementation of AI technology in the classroom should maximize both safety and privacy, while also advancing equity and fairness. Ms. Smote, recently the Office of Education Technology, or OET, at the Department of Education was eliminated as part of a reduction in force at the agency. OET played an integral role in developing and implementing policies and initiatives on education technology. What has been the role of OET, and how has this office assisted states in the implementation of AI technologies in the classroom from your perspective?
Well, I think it's important to name that OET really puts out guidelines and really best practices for states and districts to follow, providing that necessary expertise and knowledge that frankly would be impossible for there to be an AI expert in every district to be able to do. Ways to communicate to parents who say that their schools right now aren't communicating with them about AI. 83% of parents have said in a Common Sense survey that they haven't heard anything from their schools about generative AI. As a parent, we know that we need to be working alongside our educators to provide that critical guidance. But I want to talk to you about something very quickly, which is a foundational layer of data privacy, security, and interoperability, which every technology needs, whether it's AI or it's cybersecurity. From 2022 to 2023, there was a 105% increase in known ransomware attacks against K-12 and higher education institutions. State and local cybersecurity grant programs were provided not only by the Department of Education, but also by CISA and other entities that provided critical support for not just AI, but technology as a whole. Without that guidance, without that knowledge, without that expertise, states and districts will have to navigate this changing technology on their own.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And to your point, it is very important. This is something I've been saying all month, that people understand the role of the Department of Education in providing frameworks and guidelines. These things are implemented at the local level, but in many districts, they don't have the resources or the knowledge or even basically the skill set to pursue aggressively emerging technologies and things like that, especially in a field that is moving as quickly as AI. Earlier this month, the Department of Education eliminated half of their staff. Additionally, President Trump signed an executive order calling for the dismantling of the department. Ms. Moat, again, how does the elimination of OET and the calls to dismantle the department entirely impact the role of the federal government in supporting access and deployment of safe AI technologies in the classroom?
Well, I think everyone here has talked about access and how important it is for us to be thinking about access. And so I want to think about the role of the essential frameworks and connectivity that have powered our communities and the ability to use that technology. The U.S. Department of Education has provided that support. The U.S. Department of Commerce has provided that support. CISA has provided that support. We talk about the need for states to be able to drive connectivity, to drive access, but they wouldn't have been able to do that without universal service funds. They wouldn't have been able to do that without the Digital Equity Act, Title II, Title IV dollars in order to lead professional development. So if we really want there to be the type of infrastructure that allows all students to thrive, we need to invest in institutions that can provide that capacity.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because I can tell you, even within the school district where I worked in my school, our computer and technology classes were taught by teachers, not practicing professionals in the field. So the ability to have outsiders come in with additional support or professional development, which is something that the Department of Education provides for school districts across the country, is not only critical and fundamental, but it is necessary, especially when we're talking about something like AI, where the technology is advancing so quickly. The safety of our students has to be a critical focal point. I don't have much time, but I'm going to ask a question. If maybe you could submit the answer for the record, that would be great.
Absolutely.
But just some ideas on what local school districts can take, steps that local school districts can take when vetting AI technology to ensure that student access is tailored to educational content and improves engagement, but also does not allow disruptions in learning or many of the other things that we saw. Thank you, and with that, I yield back.
The representative from Utah, Mr. Owens, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. And I want to first of all thank the witnesses for participating in this very timely use of AI in education. If we want our children and our education to be at the forefront of the world, we need to start adapting the latest technologies for the use in classrooms in a safe and responsible manner. And I look forward to, again, talking with the witnesses about this. It's probably one of the more important conversations we're going to have in a bipartisan way. Dr. Dobrin, one tricky aspect of AI adoption in schools is assessing the cognitive impact. You mentioned that further research might be helpful to understand how AI-generated content and automated problem solving might affect students' ability to think critically. And that highlights a real concern. While it's obviously a rapidly growing field, how does research base tell us so far of AI's impact on critical thinking, and what type of additional research would be helpful?
Thank you for that. And yes, indeed, that, as other witnesses have said, research right now is one of the keys. And what we don't have regarding cognitive development right now is long-term effect research. And we have data that both shows the improvement in critical thinking and problem-solving skills when AI is in use, and we also have data that also shows that some students are turning to the technology to do the work for them. I think that the real key here for educators has a lot to do with demystifying how these technologies actually work. In the conversation we've had thus far, we tend to talk about AI as a single thing. AI does this, AI can do this. AI is an umbrella term for a lot of different kinds of technologies. And so when we start looking specifically at cognitive development, part of what we have to think about is how we're using those various kinds of AIs in various contexts. This is one of the reasons that in my work, and this was also brought up by one of the other witnesses earlier, that I emphasize that this is about augmentation, not automation. All AI requires three things: fantastic computing process, lots of data, and human expertise, what was referred to as human in the loop a moment ago. If we can influence that, then part of what we're inherently influencing also is that role of cognitive development, that the human is the one running the process. That, to me, is where the research has to unfold, is how that expertise gets manifest.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Rafelbear, you highlighted the importance of state autonomy in implementing AI literacy and integrating AI tools into the K-12 education. As AI adoption grows across school systems, how can we ensure that all states can develop the necessary frameworks and support structures to ensure the safe and effective AI integration?
Well, ILA Group has built now 2 frameworks, one that is been developed for state education agencies and one for district superintendents. That was based off work that we've been doing with a working group of 40 different districts and states across the country. Beyond creating these frameworks, which are grounded within the political, operational, technical, and fiscal realities of AI implementation, and giving department by department questions to start to consider, we've also rolled out a 3-tiered process that begins with deep stakeholder engagement. Our belief is that there is no work that should be getting done on AI that isn't starting first with an incredible amount of listening within your community and within your state. We think that you go from that part of the process to developing ethical guardrails and principles based on the kinds of conversations that are coming up in your community, using that to then develop guidance. And then from there, you can go into larger scale optimization. I think what ends up happening so often, though, is that states start to feel pressure, and in turn, districts start to feel pressure that they need to do something. They need to show that they're being responsive. Well-intentioned organizations will provide templates of resources, and then often you'll hear all these data points that, 90% of states have guidance that's up on their websites, but it hasn't trickled down. And it's to the comment that was made earlier about the reality that many parents don't feel like they're even hearing about AI. Well, that's because there's too many templatized guidance and resources being provided without starting with deep stakeholder engagement and listening and bringing these conversations to our communities. We're hearing over and over again from the leading providers that we're moving closer to AGI. Right? The idea that artificial intelligence will have human-like capabilities. That means that we have to be doing even more around stakeholder engagement and communication to make sure that all parents and citizens really understand that.
Thank you, thanks so much. I just want to, and I'm running out of time here, I just want to say real quick to the point of Department of Education, that ship has sailed. We now have to make sure that innovators like yourself are part of this conversation and not bureaucrats in D.C. And I'm excited about the fact we're finally going to be putting this power back in the hands of parents and school teachers and those in the local level. So I'm excited about that process. With that, I'll yield back.
Representative Lee of Pennsylvania is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much to the panel for your testimony. Artificial intelligence and its algorithms are built by humans, and they're trained on data that's created by humans, which means it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that AI often reinforces the same implicit and explicit biases that humans carry, classism or sexism, racism, ableism. I just want to really lift up that we can't ignore the capacity of AI to deepen the systemic inequalities already facing marginalized communities, and AI in K-12 schools isn't any different. With a dismantled Department of Education, where a drastically reduced Office of Civil Rights, or Office for Civil Rights, is being weaponized to undercut students' civil rights, K-12 schools are unprepared to address the vast inequities that can come with AI. So we should be especially concerned about rapidly expanding school surveillance AI that includes facial recognition technology with error rates of 35% for Black girls, and online chat monitoring and so-called aggression detection that is layered with racialized assumptions about communication. Much of this surveillance technology is an extension of histories of scientific racism and eugenics. Ms. Moat, in your testimony, you referenced a resource created last year by the Department of Education on avoiding the discriminatory use of artificial intelligence. The Department of Education under the last administration created this resource to inform schools of how AI can violate student civil rights. It included examples like facial recognition, consistently misidentifying Black students, and predictive algorithms flagging Black students as more likely to carry out disciplinary infractions. So without resources like this from the Department of Education, are schools equipped to keep students' civil rights intact when deploying AI surveillance?
It's important to name that there's no tool, as you mentioned, in education that is without bias. Every tool in use in America's classrooms today has algorithmic unreliability or bias built in because it's built by humans. And as you so aptly mentioned, it repeats the bias that's already in existing data sets or the bias that is held by the developers themselves. There's tools to mitigate this effect, something called reweighting, which allows you to actually index for students with disabilities or students from subgroups. But in order to do that, to have the data to be able to train those models to be more equitable, to be more fair, to offer opportunity for every student, you need data and data infrastructure. And right now, we are seeing a dismantling of our data infrastructure at the federal level. The very data sets that would allow industry, that would allow researchers, that would allow others to use that data to be able to train these tools to mitigate bias. It's really important that we name that there's no way to eliminate bias, but we can provide guidance, like the guidance you mentioned, provide data for training, and work alongside industry to mitigate bias that exists in these tools.
Yeah, thank you. But the fact that we can no longer rely on the Department of Education to serve its key functions, including its jobs of safeguarding students against discriminatory AI surveillance, is especially concerning since school surveillance technology is a multi-billion-dollar industry that seems to really elude oversight and accountability. So, Ms. Moat, do the companies selling their AI surveillance to schools typically evaluate their algorithms for racial bias? And how important is it that these companies evaluate and monitor their products to mitigate that bias?
One challenge for all companies that are using AI right now is they can only look at the data that they have themselves. So let me go back to my days of making copies in the copy room. Has anyone ever made a Xerox of a paper and then you make a Xerox of it again and then you make a Xerox of it again, and over time that copy degrades? If you only test your tool against the data that you have yourself, it's not going to be able to surface the bias or to surface the challenges that might be within that tool. And so we need to provide an infrastructure for industry to walk alongside schools and districts to be able to make sure their tools are equitable.
Thank you. I just want to really quickly, in the 2023 survey by the Center for Democracy and Technology, almost 40% of teachers reported that sensitive student data was being shared with law enforcement and being used in predictive policing algorithms to identify children who may commit future criminal behavior. And this was closer to 50% of teachers at schools receiving Title I funding and closer to 60% of special education teachers. I wanted to mention that before I kind of just conclude, because without guidance, accountability, and oversight from a functioning Department of Education, AI surveillance in schools will exacerbate the school-to-prison pipeline and cause irreversible harm to Black, brown, and other vulnerable communities. It's why I introduced a piece of legislation last year that will require the federal agency using AI to establish a dedicated civil rights office to identify, prevent, and address algorithmic biases. But that's just scratching the surface. We know that there's so much more to do. So I thank you so much for your time, and I yield back.
I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. One of the reasons that I wanted to hold this hearing on AI in education is not only because I think the potential is so incredible in the specific context of education, but also because I think it offers a window into just how transformational the technological changes that we're experiencing right now are going to be across all sectors of society, which I think is something that really policymakers and the public at large is starting to get to wake up to a little bit. And there's been some references to that during today's hearing. Specifically, Ms. Moat, you mentioned this is a technology on par with electricity. Ms. Raphael Baer, am I saying that correctly? Close enough, Raphael Baer. You mentioned that the leading labs are increasingly talking about the arrival of AGI, artificial general intelligence. So I wanted to give each of you a few moments to expound on those ideas.
Well, an arrival technology, right? This is electricity, this is the internet, this is automobiles. You used to have to pick up the phone and call a dispatcher to call a taxi. Now you can do it from your phone. And so arrival technologies displace workers. They can require new skills and competencies, but they also require a level of support in disrupting of existing systems so that they can be embraced across industry rather than having them replace humans. I think the work that is happening right now in terms of what Congress can do, our colleagues have really mentioned the need for research and development, the support for public data and infrastructure, the need for some set of guidelines and guardrails, supporting educator professional development, providing equitable access, and
Great.
this body really convening collaboration and dialogue. If we're to meet this moment, we need to do it together.
Great,
I
thank
look
you.
forward to the opportunity.
You bet.
Thank you for the opportunity to share more on this. I think that the fact that we are hearing over and over again that we are getting closer and closer to AGI is something that concerns me a great deal, that this is not a conversation that is more commonplace across America right now. The fact that, once again, we're in a moment where it feels like we're asking our education system to take on something that's actually a societal issue. And I see this and hear this every single day from state and district superintendents who earnestly want to move forward on this work, but are really concerned about cybersecurity and data. They need to have far more expertise, and that is a critical role of the federal government. That is a critical role of a role like a national cybersecurity director who should be helping to make sure that we have the safest systems possible around cyber and data, so that states and districts can do their correct role, which is to lead these conversations locally and to make sure that they have visions around artificial intelligence and the kind of workforce upskilling that's required that matches their local context and their local needs, with them being able to take off their plate this level of expertise and oversight around keeping their systems cyber free in terms of cybersecurity issues.
Thanks very much. And Mr. Chisholm and Dr. Dobrin, I wanted to, if we had time permitting, to pose a question to you as well. There's been a lot of discussion about further research that's needed, some of which has already happened. If you could pose one kind of urgent research question when it comes to evaluating the effectiveness of certain AI tools, what would it be? Like, one possibility for me would be the immersiveness of the tool. You know, you could have a sort of animated Einstein teach you physics. You could have a text-based Einstein teach you physics. If we have a sufficiently developed VR, you could actually float through the cosmos as it happens. So that might be one area to look. But what would be the research questions that are most urgent?
I'll go ahead. I really think, I love the idea, especially with students, but I'm really focused on the teacher side of things because we have to have teachers to get to students. So for me, it's really teacher efficacy. I think that's the big thing. How can we use this to make them better and more efficient at what they do? So again, I don't have that 28, 29, 30-year veteran that wants to walk out the door. She wants to stay. You know, the teacher that I talked about earlier, she's staying with us. She's not going to retire. So to me, it is about teacher efficacy, and I think that is the primary focus for me.
Great. Dr. Dobrin?
I would pick up on something we've already been discussing, and that's access. I think there needs to be longer-term research on not just where access is available, for instance, in Appalachia in the Southwest where broadband is not as easily accessible, but more so what happens in the distinction between our students who only have access to the free data sets, the free LLMs, GPT, Gemini, Copilot, as opposed to those students who have the socioeconomic access to proprietary data sets and to platforms that are more disciplinarily specific. We need to figure out the differences of what happens with those access points.
That is an interesting question. I mean, one of the things we see happening, though, is that what is the paid tier this month is available to the free tier next month. So there is this sort of democratizing aspect to the technology. With that, the representative from Florida, Ms. Wilson, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Kiley and Ranking Member Bonamici, for today's hearing. Thank you so much. And thank you to our witnesses for being here today. As you know, public schools are the backbone of our democracy. And as AI continues to be implemented in our education system, we must work in addressing its potential and worry about the disparities that come with its implementation. Clearly, education has some big challenges with AI, but this committee is missing the real crisis, the dismantling of the Department of Education. It's absurd to envision a bright future for our students when the Office of Education Technology, vital for AI oversight, has just been shut down. And it's even more absurd for this subcommittee to ignore the wrecking ball crashing into our public school systems across the nation right now by abolishing the Department of Education. This is like worrying about the ship's Wi-Fi access while the Titanic is sinking. With this, I have a few questions. Ms. Note, can AI work without human input? And what are the consequences of gutting the very workforce responsible for ensuring AI is used ethically and effectively?
So can AI work without human input? No. And in fact, generative AI and artificial intelligence systems have to be trained on both our responses and the data that's being used. Now, let's just talk about what happens when we take away data that could be used to train these systems effectively alongside humans. Right now, we're seeing families lose access to information on the college and career scorecard, being able to make critical decisions about what's happening or what choices they make with the loss of IPEDS data, or the loss of EdFacts data, where if you're moving from one community to the other, not being able to know the quality of your schools or how to compare one school to the other. This vital support that is provided not just by the humans who are helping guide local districts and states, but also that are guiding families through the provision of open access data sets and knowledge is a critical role that if we lose, our families will be less informed, our students will be less prepared, and our educators will be left without the resources they need.
Amen. Ms. Note, with the Office of Civil Rights being sidelined or weakened, how are students, particularly those from marginalized communities, supposed to ensure their rights are protected if AI tools amplify existing disparities? Because they will.
I want to return to, I don't think an educator wants to harm a student, but they need to know about these tools. They need to know about the tools that are being used. They need to have research about what's the most effective tool in order to make the right choice for a student. Every educator in this country wants students to succeed. I know that because I meet them every single day. But they don't necessarily have the expertise to know that this tool or that tool is better, that the $99 edition of Conmigo is better than the free tutor. And they don't have the resources to make those choices and to navigate those deep, deep challenges that they have to meet young people. If we want to overcome achievement gaps, we need to make sure that our educators have the knowledge, expertise, and capacity to make the right choices for students alongside families. That can only happen when we have that knowledge, when we have that capacity, that data, and that expertise.
Ms. Note, how do we prevent AI from becoming just another tool that benefits already advantaged and leaves behind the same Black and brown students who have historically been underserved and who have no computers?
Thank you. I think equitable access is something every single witness has talked about. And so I think Congress needs to renew their investment in public connectivity infrastructure. They need to have targeted programs to ensure that all communities have access to the technology, the hardware, reliable internet connectivity, and the adequate technical support to benefit every community in this country.
Thank you. I yield back.
The representative from North Carolina, Mr. Harris, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of you on the panel for the incredible testimony you've given today. I appreciated the opportunity to read through your testimony that was submitted to us prior. I have a couple of questions, and really the first one is going to be to you, Mr. Chisholm. Your written testimony mentioned that inaccurate or biased content is a big challenge with AI adoption. And as you pointed out, AI models are only as good as the underlying data that they're trained on, and that's what concerns me. Research from Carnegie Mellon University revealed that large language model bots trained on the internet since 2016 show more polarization than bots trained before Donald Trump's first election. In fact, the research also showed that bots trained from books were more socially conservative than bots trained through the internet or social media. There's, in fact, numerous examples of left-leaning political bias that shows up. When asked if a white Christian man should be ashamed, Google Gemini lists a variety of liberal buzzwords like systemic injustices and marginalized communities. When asked if a black female lesbian should be ashamed, it says absolutely not. The free version of ChatGPT is unable to acknowledge Donald Trump as the current president and even says that Joe Biden is in the White House in 2025. Now, I point all that out, Mr. Chisholm, to come back to you as superintendent of a school district there in Pearl, Mississippi. How do you make sure in that role that your district's AI use doesn't amplify existing biases or spread false information?
I think that's a fabulous question, and that's got a lot of answers to it. But I will tell you that some of the big companies are working on this. I mean, they do realize that some of that bias is built in. And in the end, I mean, there's going to be bias in every computer program that you create. So for us as a district, we have created our own server. So we get to do the training ourselves. So I think that's one big advantage for us. And I will say we've discussed equity as well. We are actually working with a huge internet company in Mississippi, C Spire, and we're actually working on trying to make our model available for all school districts in the state of Mississippi completely free. So we're working on that. So again, is there a way to script it all out? Absolutely not yet. But I think we're moving forward to that. So I think it's good training, and it's really it's good communication. It's people, when they see those things happen, is pointing those things out, and then we can go back and make adjustments to that model, even on our end, on our server. But I can tell you again, even using the models such as ChatGPT, they know that this is a problem, and they are working on it. I'm on a computer call with them about every 2 weeks with OpenAI. So this has been a discussion that we've had, and I don't think there's a perfect answer for it, but I do know that they are working on it, and certainly that's something that we will monitor 24 hours a day, because we want to make sure that the information that we get back is good. And I will also say, even using the larger language models like ChatGPT, if you're on the paid version, or even the free version of that, you can go in and script some of this out yourself. You know, if you tell it how you want it to respond, you tell it the websites that you would like for it to go to look for information. You know, I have that scripted into mine, so now I know where that information is coming from. So I realize that now that information that's coming back is not from Wikipedia. It's good information from the sites that I determined that I want it to come from. So there are ways around that, even though the model itself doesn't fix it.
And are you finding that schools should be wary of the development behind AI bots and be selective about the programs they use in their schools?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I think going through all of this information and getting really good information, again, if we were to go with a company, a large company, that would be a multi-week investigation into what they do and how they do it before I put it in front of kids.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir. Dr. Raphael Baer, in your recommendations for policymakers, you mentioned that the federal role should be intentionally limited. I agree, especially since this administration and obviously the direction we're moving will be working to eliminate the federal role in education entirely. What would you say to someone who argues that the federal role should be unlimited rather than limited, and what kind of detrimental effects would overregulation have on schools?
Well, I think we've been talking about this so much in this committee, this is moving too fast. There is nothing that the federal government would put on paper that isn't going to be outdated even a couple of months from now. And it is imperative that states have the ability and the flexibility to make these decisions within their own context and allowing districts the ability to innovate. It's critical that the federal government not play a role in defining things like AI literacy or AI curriculum. Curriculum and content all should be left to local levels. However, I think the place that is really critical is around cybersecurity and data privacy.
Okay. Well, thank you. Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
The representative from North Carolina, Ms. Adams, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Last month, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools, one of the largest districts in North Carolina, launched a bold district-wide effort to shape a community vision for AI in education. They're inviting parents and teachers and students to the table, not just to respond to change, but to lead it. And that's the kind of leadership that we need. But instead, the leadership that we're seeing at the federal level is tying our schools' hands with budget cuts, with confusion, with political agendas that have absolutely nothing to do with what's best for our most disadvantaged kids. The kids on free and reduced lunch, the kids who rely on Medicaid, the kids whose only option is public school. AI is already reshaping our classrooms. And so the real question is, how are we helping schools use it responsibly, or are we leaving them to figure it out on their own? And so here's what I've been hearing from educators, from parents, and my own daughter, who was a public school principal. The promise of AI is real, but so are the risks. And we've already seen cases where, as I reiterate, my colleague Representative Lee has said, AI tools flag Black parents for plagiarism at higher rates than their peers. And that's not innovation, that's bias, plain and simple. So Ms. Moat, AI isn't just showing up in lesson plans. It's now embedded in how students are evaluated, how feedback is given, and how learning is tracked. And so how can schools ensure that AI tools are actually supporting equity? I know some people think that's a bad word. I think it's a good one. In classrooms, not reinforcing bias. And what role should the federal government play in setting guardrails to make sure that these tools serve all students fairly? Ms. Moat.
Thank you. You actually offered the answer when you're talking about the great work that Charlotte-Mecklenburg is doing right now, which is building AI literacy with parents, with communities, with educators, and really putting students and parents and communities and educators at the center of the work that they're doing. You have to be able to ask questions of these tools. You have to be able to understand if the results that they're putting out from these models have inaccurate information or might not potentially have the right types of inputs. So if we don't build AI literacy in our educators, with our parents, and with our communities, we're not going to be able to use these tools to the best of their advantage.
Well, thank you for your great comments about Charlotte Public Schools.
They're wonderful down there at Charlotte-Mecklenburg.
Our chair of our school board is sitting out here, and I'm happy to see her. But while Charlotte Public Schools are trying to move forward with innovation, we're facing real setbacks. Just last month, we lost over $5 million in federal grants, funding that helped high-need schools recruit and train diverse teachers. And those grants were simply cut because they supported DEI. I still think those are good words. But let's be clear. Students learn best from teachers who understand them, who reflect their communities. That kind of representation isn't a luxury in a district where students represent more than 175 countries. It's essential. Ms. Moat, we know AI is a powerful tool, but it doesn't replace teachers, especially not teachers who reflect the lives and identities of the students they serve. So what are the consequences of cutting off funding for programs that recruit and retain diverse teachers?
Well, I think every member of this committee can say that we need to keep teachers at the center of the education enterprise. And so when we don't have teachers to serve the communities that they are from, when we don't have classrooms that are reflective of the communities that students are coming from, we know actually that that affects student outcomes. Research shows us that having a connection with an adult in school, not only, as I shared before, reduces suicidal ideation, but is the single greatest determinant of whether or not student learning outcomes will excel.
So let me move on and talk about the data. So good policy depends on good information, but last month the Trump administration eliminated nearly $900 million in contracts from the Institute of Education Sciences, the research arm of the Department of Education, and that's the same office that helps districts and policymakers understand what's working and what's not. So Ms. Moat, how does cutting IES funding impact the school's ability to use AI responsibly and equitably? And could that data gap leave underfunded schools even further behind?
Yes, if we don't know what works for whom and under what conditions, how can we choose the right tools for students from all backgrounds?
Thank you, Ms. Moat. And if we want students to succeed in the age of AI, we can't just chase shiny new tools. We have to invest in the people, in the research, and the infrastructure that make innovation safe and meaningful. And I thank you all very much. Mr. Chair, I'm going to yield back those few other minutes that I have. Thank you.
Representative from Pennsylvania, Mr. McKenzie, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you to the chairman, and I appreciate all of the testimony being provided today. A very important topic. Integrating AI into our education system has huge potential benefit for our students. I think we're all aware of, even right now in its early stages, what it can do to increase educational opportunity and customization for students. So a lot of benefit there. We are also talking about some of the elements that we need to be aware of to make sure that we protect privacy and security for our students. Great topics. But earlier, we heard from a number of testifiers about bias that can be built into the AI systems that are being incorporated into the classroom. And I think we're all aware that depending on who nurtures or trains the AI, they're going to end up putting out different results at the end of the day. Ultimately, I think what we want for our students is a maximally seeking truth AI. We want the truth to be provided to our students. So it shouldn't be a corporation, it shouldn't be a foreign entity that is maybe weighing in on the results that are coming from AI. It shouldn't even be a politician on this panel saying that we need to reweight results so that we get the accurate outcome that we want for our students. So how do we, and how should everybody, be thinking about what AI we are selecting, what actual critiques or reviews of that AI is being made available publicly when we see that bias or misinformation is being included in results, and how does that get communicated to the decision makers in school districts or local entities that are actually picking the AI systems? And I'll go first to Dr. Ray Fulbert.
Thank you so much. Incredibly thoughtful. I think there's a couple of layers to that answer. I think from our perspective, we think states having AI assurance labs is one place to be able to examine this. Having one place where the public has a level of transparency about how the model on the front end before it is approved for use, what it has gone through to be rigorously tested, but then in an ongoing way, looking at the outputs of the model, knowing that these models evolve over time as people are using them. But I think you're also hitting a larger topic that we've talked about a few times today about AGI. What happens when we get to a place where we are working alongside models that are doing things at the same level of humans, knowing that there's levels of bias within that? And I think that's where the importance of critical thinking and helping to really infuse in our students understanding about ethics and ethical considerations is such a critical role of our K-12 system, and to be able to make sure that we're bringing those conversations often into these community engagement sessions and thinking about this, because we'll never get rid of bias, but we can help to make sure we're shaping a generation of learners who deeply understands the power and importance of human relationship and when and where to use AI and under what conditions and how to evaluate those outputs consistently.
I'll go to anybody else on the panel. Do you guys have any thoughts, or are there resources available where people can go and see which AI systems are actually providing, on a whole, collectively, maximally truth-seeking information, because I think this is going to be a real challenge for everybody that is adopting this to have this kind of decision made in a classroom. It's akin to selecting your curriculum or your textbooks. But at the same time, there is a lot less information out there right now about these AI systems. So how do you, as educators, see that?
I think that's a fantastic question, and I want to reinforce what Dr. Rafael Baer has said. But I think there's a step back in asking that question. I think making the analog to textbooks is very important, because we're going to have to think about adoption in the classroom of various platforms in the same way we think about curricular adoptions of textbooks, both in finance models and in content models. But I think in answer to your bigger question, this is where the importance of demystifying these tools becomes critical. Because if we're going to move into the critical thinking position about having students be able to evaluate the information that's put before them, they first have to understand how those systems work, what an LLM does, where the data is pulled from, so that they can begin those evaluative processes. In other words, by demystifying the function of a generative AI tech, allows the student then to see the working model and understand these are now the questions I have to ask. As to resources for identifying which platforms are more viable than others, the first thing we have to acknowledge is that what we need is more research and development for platforms specifically designed for education. We do a lot in education of retrofitting to technologies that have already existed and been put in play in industry and other places. We actually need platforms that are designed for education specifically. This is why Mr. Chisholm's approach to having his own independent server and his own model is a very kind of forward-thinking model. So I think the demystification process is critical.
Well, I will wrap up. We are over time, but I want to thank all of you again for your very thoughtful input today. I think this is, again, an incredibly important topic as we look to advance education in our country. And I appreciate particularly that last point about demystifying the systems, because I'll date myself very quickly here. When I was growing up, scientific calculators were a new invention. But at the same time, we were always trained to actually understand the fundamentals and the processes before we used the scientific calculators to get the answer in a quicker fashion. So thank you again, and I yield back.
The representative from Illinois, Ms. Miller, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to all the witnesses who have come. This is a very interesting conversation. And Mr. Chisholm, we've heard a lot about the potential benefits of AI in schools, but one of the long-standing priorities of this committee has been student privacy. And so there's a lot that people don't understand, or we're rightly concerned about when it comes to AI's impact on student privacy. You mentioned this a bit in your testimony, but what student privacy pitfalls do you think districts should be aware of, and how has your district handled this?
That's a great question. And again, student privacy, we have to fall under FERPA laws. So we got to make sure we're in compliance with that. It's real simple. I don't want to make this, oversimplify this, but it really is simple. If you're using a public entity, I don't care if it's OpenAI, Grok, any of these others, you can't put student identifiable information on it or teacher identifiable information. So really teaching people to scrub files, that's the biggest thing if you're going to use an Excel file that has this information, knowing what you need to take out. So that's a way that we handle that if you're using something like OpenAI. However, we alleviate that by using our own server. So I don't have to worry about FERPA laws because it does not face the internet in any way, shape, or form. So again, we've done trainings with teachers and administrators. We can put any file that we want on our own server, and we don't ever have to worry about student privacy there because it's housed on our own campuses. So we don't have to worry about that. So I think that's a way to do that. And again, it's a pretty expensive way to do it. However, on the flip side, if you're using this as a district, such with OpenAI, you're eventually going to start having to pay for tokens. So in the end, we as a district have decided that it's going to be more cost effective to just go ahead and pay for our own server than try to pay for tokens with one of those as well. So hope that answers your question. That is the crux of what we do. It is good training first if you're using a public server, and then on the other side, we just create our own so we alleviate the problem altogether.
Thank you, and I appreciate how you're leading the way there. Mr. Chisholm, I have another question. One of the most frequent concerns we hear about AI in schools is that students will use AI as a crutch. For example, students will ask AI to write their essays or answer their homework questions. I know there's limits to how much a school district can do, especially once a student goes home for the day, but how are you thinking through these challenges?
That's probably my favorite question. And really, we have to rethink what we do in education. I've told our teachers and in all of the presentations that I do that we've got to rethink what we do in the classroom. Basically, we have to control the 8 hours that we have. We can't worry about other things outside of school because understand they're going to use it. So really, we need a heavier focus on what we do in the classroom and control the 8 hours that we have. And that means heavier weighting on grades for the things that we do in classrooms. It means that, again, we have to shift. Instead of sending things home for kids to write, we need to take care of those things within the classroom and worry about the controllables. And again, we can't worry about what happens outside. We just have to shift our focus to things like having projects done in class or having students explain their work. Why do I care where the information came from if the student can actually give that information back and teach someone else? They know the material. That's the ultimate thing that we're trying to do within the district. So control the 8 hours that we have.
Thank you. And Dr. Dobrin, one especially exciting aspect of AI adoption is the potential that this technology can transform education for special needs students. And I have 2 grandsons with special needs. For instance, AI-powered programs can facilitate speech-to-text software or help visually impaired students participate more fully in class. Can you talk more about how AI is being used to practically enhance special ed?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And the first thing I need to say is that I do not have experience in special education specifically, and Ms. Moat earlier had addressed some of this, and so I defer to her on that. What you're talking about specifically are assistive technologies. For me, in terms of special needs students, and also really for any student, one of the most enriching possibilities that we're seeing with AI right now is in customized learning pathways. The ability for a student to move through information and content and all the things associated with education in a way that is more effective for that learner. Now, I tend to also put a stopgap on where that becomes beneficial once we get past higher ed into credentialing, but I think that customized learning pathways right now are one of the most important things we're developing, particularly in terms of real-time assessment and the ability for students in that moment of assessment to adjust their learning path to see, I did not understand this concept, I now have this other way of learning about it. That to me is one of the most important things we're doing.
Thank you, and I yield back.
I'll now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Moat, I think it's clear that there's some benefits and some concerns about AI, some of the benefits. Is there any question that AI can expand the capability of a classroom teacher? And if so, are there other areas where it's particularly good or bad? Language, math, science?
Well, I'm of the view that AI literacy is a foundational literacy, and frankly, AI itself is the best revenge of English teachers because it's all about how do you ask good questions. And so when we think about how to build literacy across our disciplines, if we really want to realize the productivity gains that Mr. Chisholm is talking about, if we want to think through ways that we can support students with disabilities, particularly around early screeners for dyslexia. I'm the mom of a dyslexic student. It would have been so much more valuable if I could have had my son screened earlier so that I could have intervened earlier. AI is allowing teachers to take that practice that used to take weeks into an afternoon, as long as they keep a human in the loop. And so for me, building that competency across all disciplines is what we need to meet this moment, Mr. Scott.
Now, you've cautioned about leaving out human interaction. Do you have to choose between AI and human interaction?
No, and actually that's not what AI models want you to do. AI models want you to put your human interactions into them so they get smarter and can be trained faster. And so when we talk about intelligent tutors adapting to students' language or identifying dialectical differences, it's because the AI is actually trying to learn from the interaction that it's having with a person.
Now, can the AI help with assessing the progress of a student in the classroom?
This is a place I think we need to be cautious. I think we always need to have a human in the loop, particularly when it comes to assessment. Tools have shown that they disproportionately flag students for cheating when they haven't cheated, by race or by dialectical difference. For example, our rural students. And so I think we need to be cautious when we think about assessments and make sure that we're engaging humans.
One of the access questions is obviously cost. How much does all of this cost if you're integrating AI into the classroom? Is it very expensive?
Well, I think Mr. Chisholm talked a little bit about the costs that he's taken on in terms of buying a server and buying technology. And so it's not just those hardware costs, Mr. Scott, it's the training that you need to do, it's the education. And I think we are in a situation right now where whether you have access to an intelligent tutor like Conmigo is about $99 a student. I know that that's a decision some school districts can't make right now because they're constrained when it comes to resources and support. It's not just about the tool, it's about the training that has to go alongside of it.
Well, I guess getting benefits to everyone on an equitable basis, what are some of the other barriers?
Yeah, I think when we think about AI's use in education, we're gonna have to really think about a partnership with families and communities, a partnership with students, and frankly, a partnership with industry. Industry is trying right now to do work to make their tools more safe, more effective, more transparent, more reliable, but they need help in terms of guidelines and guardrails. And if industry has to conform to 50 different states' privacy laws, data laws, or AI laws, imagine what that means for an economy of scale or equitable access to tools. If we're gonna ask everybody to build an AI tool for the state of Delaware, or the state of Virginia, or the state of Colorado, we miss the opportunity, frankly, to be able to appreciate the richness and diversity that we have in the United States.
Bias has been mentioned. There are a number of ways bias can pop up in AI. Can you talk about that in the remaining time?
In 30 seconds, okay. So I'll just give one example. You know, I think, as I said, AI looks for the interactions that it has with humans. And so there's some really great research studies that have been done that when an AI tool is trained, for example, on just assessment, it doesn't flag students more or less from one background. But if somebody uses a word like y'all, which I use all the time, it flags that student potentially for cheating. And so dialectical difference, not just race or socioeconomic status, are things we need to be paying attention to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The representative from Guam, Mr. Moylan, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So emerging AI technologies have the potential to enhance our quality of life in many ways, especially in increasing efficiency and learning outcomes for students. AI may also provide innovative support for students who need individualized learning plans, especially for special education. However, we must be aware of the risk of these technologies, especially with privacy concerns. Proper safety protocols can mitigate many of these risks, and best practice guidance are being constantly issued to mitigate these risks. As we enter the future economy, preparing our youth to enter the workforce, where employers are increasingly interested in AI into their business models, it's especially important. Many paths towards high-earning jobs exist. AI and computer science can offer alternative paths towards high-skill employment, where many opportunities do not necessarily require a traditional 4-year degree to participate. So for my first question, Dr. Rafelbear, You mentioned that implementing AI should reflect the priorities of each community. As employers begin adopting more and more AI tools into their businesses, it is critical that we ensure our students are ready to join the modern workforce. Can you talk specifically about what kind of AI skills employers are looking for?
Yes, thank you. I think as we think about this generation who is going to be moving on, the thing that they're going to be most critically asked about is just their basic foundations around AI, understanding what it is, how it works, its limitations, its risks, and being able to communicate about that. But I think what we're going to see over time is much more of a desire for our education setting to take on more of the AI literacy work, to evolve from what has been digital literacy, which we are now well past, and really starting to understand how to work alongside AI, what use cases are appropriate, and then how to always think about the relationship with other humans. We know how important it is to be able to have relationships, to grow high growth, high impact teams, and increasingly those kinds of skills are going to have to be ones that we're reinforcing in an AI age. And the last thing I'd say, I think in all of this is going to be just a huge undergrounding feeling around ethics. I think employers are going to want to know that students are graduating with a keen understanding about ethical considerations. And that's something that gets infused throughout the curriculum. It's no one subject area's domain, but it's why deep stakeholder engagement matters so much, to surface the kinds of ethical questions that are being asked and then use that in real world ways in the classroom.
Thank you. And for Dr. Dobrin, in your testimony, you mentioned that AI literacy is crucial for students entering the workforce. Teaching AI may come with many challenges, and education leaders might not know the best way to begin. What advice would you give our teachers and education officials that want to ensure students are equipped with skills employers need?
Thank you. Yes. The first place I would begin, and it's been mentioned several times, is this concept of AI literacy, which I think we actually, and I've written about this, we need to expand into AI literacy, AI competencies, and AI fluencies, because different work paths require different levels of skill sets specifically from AI. In the work that I do with industry, usually the number one topic, and it's come up here several times, that employers are looking for is data security, particularly when they're working with their own proprietary data sets. So my advice very specifically, and I work with lots of educators about this, is that we adopt a model that we have used in the United States for a long time that I call industry to curriculum. And what that means is understanding where industry, a specific industry, is deploying AI and how, and then adjusting our curriculum to that. We can see this in a lot of the disciplines we teach, particularly in higher ed, nursing, law, engineering. These are disciplines that are designed to provide credentials towards specific industries. Once the industries start determining what exactly they're looking for in terms of AI skills, then we adopt curriculum to that as a way to move education into workplace development.
Excellent, thank you. Last question, Dr. Rafelberg. Your professional background is in special education. Can you speak more about how educators can leverage AI tools to tailor plans for students enrolled in special ed?
I think one of the most exciting places on this is both the ability for educators and caregivers to work together and to use AI to help to simplify what can sometimes feel like a lot of jargon and technical language and can make it difficult to best support students. And then for educators, being able to effectively communicate and provide tips and ways in which families can work at home to best support the students and over time and provide real pathways.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, panel.
Thank you very much to all our witnesses, and I will now recognize Ranking Member Bonamici for a closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but thank you especially to the witnesses for traveling here for your testimony and bringing your expertise on this excellent panel. As we conclude, one thing is abundantly clear: artificial intelligence will play a significant role in shaping the future of education, and we should be breaking down rather than creating barriers for the students and the educators who are navigating this transformation. AI in education presents tremendous opportunities, but also serious challenges, as we heard. If implemented responsibly, it has the potential to enhance learning, provide personalized instruction, equip students with the skills they need to thrive in an increasingly digital world. But without guardrails, we will see decreasing access to opportunity, a deepening of inequities we're trying to overcome, and risk serious privacy and security breaches. The Department of Education has been instrumental in closing opportunity gaps, providing students in low-income and rural communities and students with disabilities with access to the resources they need, stripping away these protections, whether they be through the dismantling of the Department of Education's Office of Educational Technologies or cuts to Title I or IDEA or the weakening of the Office of Civil Rights. These would all be a grave mistake. The federal government would be leaving schools to navigate these challenges, exacerbating disparities and failing the very students who rely most on federal support, as we've heard, particularly low-income students and students with disabilities. We've seen this play out before when the digital divide threatened to leave millions of students behind in the early days of the internet. It was federal leadership that helped bridge the gap. We cannot repeat history by allowing AI to widen existing inequities. Instead, we must guarantee that every student, no matter their zip code, has access to the tools and knowledge they need to succeed in the classrooms and careers of tomorrow. And I know this is the K-12 subcommittee, but as also a member of the Higher Education Committee, we talked about workforce. But one of the things I do want to mention, and I think our witnesses made a great case for it today when we have a head of an English department and someone who was talking a lot about ethics with Dr. Durbin and Dr. Raphael Baer. Tech executives I've heard recently say, we don't need just computer science majors and people who code. We need people who are philosophers and ethicists as well as we navigate these serious challenges. So the stakes could not be higher. We cannot afford to get this wrong. I urge my colleagues to stand with us and defend public education, protect vital resources, and provide every student with a fair shot at success. And I look forward to the continued conversation. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thanks very much. I think this has been a great hearing. I think that we have moved the ball forward in improving a bit our institutional understanding of a phenomenon that is really beyond any of our full understanding, but that we urgently need to grapple with nonetheless. Ms. Moat likened AI to electricity and being what she called an arrival technology. Ms. Rafelbear noted that the arrival of AGI, artificial intelligence, could be coming sooner than has been thought. This is defined differently by different people, but generally refers to a system that develops capabilities that exceed human capabilities across any domain. And the conversation about this has been largely limited to the leading labs and those who follow them, but it's something that we all need to be part of throughout the country, given the profound impacts it's going to have on all of our lives. But today specifically, we've gotten a window into how the possibilities offered by AI in education, and I think the main takeaway today is that those possibilities really are boundless. Mr. Chisholm noted that education is often the last to change when it comes to technology, or perhaps really anything else, but that really can't be the case here. Because I think we already know enough to know that those schools, those districts, those states that adopt and integrate AI in the right ways are going to do very well by their students and are going to propel student success and are going to outperform those jurisdictions that don't. And by the way, in other countries like China has been very focused on this topic, and so our global competitiveness is at stake as well. Of course, in order to do this effectively, we do need to have professional development, which is why I think what Mr. Chisholm has been doing throughout Mississippi is fantastic, that supports teachers. We learned today that most teachers still aren't getting training when it comes to integrating AI, and I agree with Mr. Mannion fully, who said that we that AI can support and not supplant teachers. And in fact, we had a great story from Mr. Chisholm about a teacher who was going to retire because, of all the hours that put it in grading, and that AI was able to entice her to stay in the classroom because it allowed her to focus on the aspects of teaching that she loved and that made the biggest difference. Another theme I think we heard today that I agree with is that there is a pressing need for more research when it comes to how AI is being deployed and the ways in which it can be deployed most effectively, what modalities are most effective, what parts of the traditional lesson plan it's best incorporated into. And as in all things in education, it's best when we have measurable outcomes and then can let that guide our pedagogy going forward. Ms. Rafelbehr has noted about everything going on at the state level in terms of research. I think that there perhaps is a federal role here as well, at least for the sort of thing we're doing today, for coordination, for sharing best practices. I think Ms. Rafelbehr mentioned having a summit of some kind, which I think is a great idea. And then you also mentioned, Ms. Rafelbehr, the importance of local engagement as well, with stakeholders, with parents, with the community, because there's the question of efficacy that research can answer, but there's also the question of values, that making sure that these technologies are being integrated in classrooms in ways that are consonant with the values of the surrounding community. This is actually a topic that is broadly applicable to AI in many facets of society. Actually, in 2018, I was a member of the California legislature. I sponsored a resolution about the benefits of AI, but how we needed to make sure it was consistent with human values as the adoption spread. And so education provides a very important example of that. We've talked today about, Ms. Moat mentioned the idea of keeping humans in the loop, which I think is a useful concept, and how there really still is no replacement for human interaction in many domains in society and many parts of our lives, and that's probably true most of all when it comes to education, given the formative nature of education for young people. We also talked about values related to data and privacy, which Ms. Miller, among others, mentioned, and then sort of both sides gave different takes on the question of bias and how we need to make sure that there are safeguards in place so that there is not bias incorporated as we use AI tools. But finally, I think that perhaps the biggest takeaway from the specific perspective of education policy today is the enormous potential that AI has to expand opportunity, to close achievement gaps, to democratize access to the very best instruction. We, for too long in this country, have had these terrible achievement gaps where opportunity is a product of where you live and where you grow up. In my view, that's a result of poor policy choices that have been made over the course of many years and decades. Perhaps not all of my colleagues will agree with me on that, but I would hope that we can find some common ground on this issue, that we should all be excited about tools that allow for instruction to be tailored in an individualized way. Several people, including Ms. Miller and Mr. Thompson, mentioned the unique potential to assist students with special needs in this area, and the ability to have this individualized instruction that is mindful of a student's strengths and weaknesses, the prior knowledge that they bring to bear, their interests even, has extraordinary potential. And I want to thank Mr. Dobrin as well for his discussion of how all of this can also democratize access to the sort of skills that are successful, that are needed for success in the workplace. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you for some who endured long travels to be here, and I think it was a great hearing, and I look forward to continuing this conversation going forward. The subcommittee stands adjourned.